In 1881, Billy the Kid had a reputation as one of the Wild West's most notorious outlaws. He'd run with vigilantes, escaped prison twice, and claimed to have killed 21 men. By July 14, 1881, Billy the Kid had been on the run for months. Back in April, the slippery outlaw had conducted his most impressive prison escape ever, killing 2 guards as he fled a death sentence in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Ever since, he'd been doggedly pursued by Sheriff Pat Garrett. That July, Garrett and his deputies followed the outlaw's trail to Fort Sumner, New Mexico, and to a ranch owned by Peter Maxwell. On that fateful night, Garrett snuck into Maxwell's home and found the rancher in bed. There, in the dark, the sheriff suddenly heard someone else approaching. He hardly had time to react when a shadowy figure appeared in the doorway and demanded in Spanish to know who else was there. Maxwell whispered to Garrett, so the sheriff raised his gun. Billy the Kid died that night at the age of 21, shot near the heart as he lurched into Maxwell's bedroom. But though several people came forward in the subsequent days to identify his body, it didn't take long for rumors to circulate that Billy the Kid had actually escaped death again. Though Billy the Kid's exploits later became the stuff of legends, less is known about his early life. He was likely born around 1859 as Henry McCarty in the slums of New York City. After moving west, McCarty was orphaned at a young age when his mother died in 1874 in New Mexico. And pretty much from that point on, McCarty started to pursue a life of crime. In 1875, McCarty got in trouble with the law for the first time. He didn't make a name for himself because of the crime, but because of his escape. After being charged with larceny and imprisoned in the local county jail, McCarty was able to squeeze himself up through the chimney and flee town. The Silver City Herald reported on his escape, marking the first time that the outlaw's name appeared in print. Over the next 2 years, Henry McCarty transformed from an orphan into an outlaw, Billy the Kid. In 1877, Billy the Kid killed his first man, Francis Cahill, after coming to blows with Cahill during a poker game. In 1878, he got wrapped up in the Lincoln County War, when Billy the Kid and others formed a vigilante group called the Regulators to avenge the death of rancher John Tustell. Tustell had been killed by a posse led by Sheriff William Brady. Billy the Kid and the Regulators got their revenge by assassinating Brady. The Lincoln County War established Billy the Kid's reputation as a talented gunslinger, but it also put a target on his back. Not only was he involved in the death of a lawman, but Billy the Kid had also killed a number of other bodies. But in 1880, his past caught up to him. In December, Sheriff Pat Garrett arrested Billy the Kid in Stinking Springs, New Mexico. A few months later, the outlaw was found guilty of killing Brady and sentenced to death. Billy the Kid had one more trick up his sleeve, however. On April 28, he mounted a daring escape, killing 2 guards and making off on a stolen horse with some stolen weapons. Garrett resolved to bring him to justice, and their encounter a few months later would lead to Billy the Kid's death. According to Pat Garrett, Billy went into the farmhouse alone. It was almost midnight, and he found Peter Maxwell awake in bed in the darkness. Garrett had just started to ask him about Billy the Kid when a figure appeared in Maxwell's door. The outlaw had apparently come to the ranch house to get some beef for dinner, and held a knife in one hand and his revolver in the other. Garrett, frozen at the head of Maxwell's bed, initially thought that it might be the rancher's brother-in-law. As the figure approached in the dark, Garrett demanded to know who it was. With Billy the Kid in front of him, Garrett seized the opportunity. He drew his revolver and fired. The kid fell dead. He never spoke. A struggle or two, a little strangling sound as he gasped for breath, and the kid was with his many victims. The next day, a coroner's jury examined the body, found that it was indeed the notorious outlaw, and declared that Billy the Kid's death had been a justifiable homicide. Then, the 21-year-old was buried in Fort Sumner. But in the years that followed, some questioned the details of Billy the Kid's death. Indeed, some suspected that Pat Garrett had not killed him at all. For most, there's no doubt that Billy the Kid died on July 14, 1881, in New Mexico at the hands of Pat Garrett. But some have speculated that Garrett faked the outlaw's death, or even that he killed the wrong man. And it's true that Garrett's deputies weren't sure who he had killed at first. These rumors lingered, especially because a man named Brushy Roberts claimed to be Billy the Kid in the 1940s. Some have also suggested that the outlaw survived into old age under the alias John Miller. But there's no proof that Billy the Kid survived his encounter with Pat Garrett. Indeed, such proof would be hard to get, as a flood washed away the outlaw's grave marker in 1904. Thus, the exact location of his body remained something of a mystery. But Pat Garrett seemed certain. Billy the Kid died at his hand at the Maxwell Ranch in 1881, and the outlaw was laid to rest in New Mexico.